Dr. Lewis, I want to thank you for joining us again. We feel like we're really lucky to have you. Gary and I had a podcast probably about 2 or 3 podcasts ago, and we got to talking about football injuries, and we were not quite agreeing on concussions, on what it was and things like that. So it's kind of neat that through Josh Hendricks, we kind of got paired up with you about some other things. And then, of course, this is kind of your expertise here. So first of all, again, and thanks a lot. And Gary, how are you doing tonight?
I'm here, man. Tired. 10 hours on the property. I'm beat. My back hurts. I'm cranky.
Good. That should be a good pod. That's always a good start to a podcast.
That's right.
Gary can get off.
So you're having a good night.
He can
too late
have
in the
some
day.
epic rants.
I can't have any coffee. Oh, I've got a couple brewing.
So one of the things we want to talk about is your book. And in the book, you talk about omega-3s and how that helps with concussions. And I thought one of the things right off the bat, your foreword talks about a gentleman whose son gets injured and how those omega-3 fatty acids help. First of all, just kind of in your opinion, what constitutes a concussion? I've hit my head 3 times. I've been knocked out once, and the doctors have told me I've had 1 concussion. But I think the other 2 were more serious accidents, and that probably was a more concussive incident. So how would you describe what a concussion actually is?
Well, in the most simple terms, it's a bruising of the brain. But if we could define a concussion, that'd be great. But, the scientific literature is somewhere between 24 and 48 different definitions. So the medical community cannot even define what a concussion is because we can't really measure it. You get knocked out or what, assuming it's not a severe traumatic brain injury, you go to the emergency room, they might do a CAT scan. They're not going to see anything. So it's a concussion that you're thinking, as far as like in the sports field and that type of thing. Typically, you're not going to see anything on imaging. We don't have a blood test that can tell us whether they have a concussion. We do different types of testing, different tools to try to do testing, and ultimately it's a clinical, toss a coin kind of thing. I'd like to say it's much more scientific than that, but it's sort of like if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, probably a duck.
Okay. Well, I'm curious. When I've been knocked out a few times in my life. I've had a few concussions too. I went through a concussion protocol as an athlete in high school. And I remember them saying that if they kept looking at my pupil dilation, that if one pupil was more dilated than the other one, that's a symptom of a concussion. And I was like, oh, okay. It didn't really make sense. I mean, this was 30 years ago.
Well, it's not a symptom of a concussion. It's a symptom of a bleeding in the brain that would be like you need to go to the operating room and have a neurosurgeon take care of you kind of thing.
Okay. I was wondering. Yeah, I got to play still. They said it was a concussion and took me out for about 5 minutes, stuck me back in and said, he seems to be fine. So those were the good old days.
I mean, we're getting a lot smarter. We're getting much smarter about, pulling people out of harm's way, because when you have a concussion, like I said, it's a bruising in the brain, but that's just the beginning. I mean, you've got that initial impact, IED exposure, helmets gliding on a football field, slipping on the ice, hitting your head, going through a windshield of a car, whatever it is, you got that initial impact. But what happens is that starts this whole biochemical cascade. And those biochemical processes will continue to burn like a smoldering fire for minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, even years, if it's not brought under control. And one of the things that feeds that is our poor American diet. And the American diet just is like throwing fuel on the fire. And so if you don't get the inflammation under control, it can continue to burn decades even. And, and what do we see decades later? We're seeing things like CTE or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. That's just the end state of that inflammation that started back when the injury occurred. And if you never get that under control, you're setting yourself up for damage.
What would be the typical symptoms then as you're going? So if you're running someone through a concussion protocol, what specifically are you looking for? Obviously you can't see it in a blood test or a CAT scan or any kind of imaging. So what physiological kind of reactions are you looking for from that person to decide if they have a concussion or not?
Well, the biggest thing, and it's interesting because I say the head athletic trainer at West Point, for example, was working with West Point to get their concussion protocols a little bit more updated. And, you could use all kinds of great testing. Balance testing is really important. On and on. There's different things. Every little startup company wants to have this, a sideline test that help you make the decision or tell you have a concussion. And the head athletic trainer is like, this is all great and all good, but there's no substitute for knowing my athletes and looking them in the eye. And you can pretty much 95 to 100% of the time know whether somebody's home or not. And, if there's any doubt, pull them out of the game because that, like I said, those biochemical processes, they start right away. And it's kind of like the engine gets caught revved up and it's rolling and rolling and rolling. And then if you have another impact on top of that, it could be devastating. And that's what kills people. And 5 or 6, high school football players every year die of some type of head injury. It's probably not the first one they had that week or that day or that game. It's probably a second or a third one that just it's piling on top of each other.
And, it's got to be kind of hard pulling somebody off the sideline and trying to get them a concussion because the adrenaline is flowing so much in these people. And when you have that adrenaline flow, it's got to be easy, not easy, but a way that a player can fake that he's okay. Because, the story that just came out, I guess this last week, Tom Brady's wife, Giselle, came out and said, he'd had a bad concussion in the game, but nobody caught it, and they put him back in because he kind of faked his way through the protocol that they had on the sideline. So,
well, and Peyton Manning blatantly said a couple of years ago that he tries to undercut or underscore or sandbag the neurocognitive testing at the beginning of the season because, basically putting in favor of set the bar low so that he can get back to playing if there's any question.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. On the Army side, I've got a friend of mine that I work with. He was in 2 IED blasts, and I can tell from being in the military when I talk to him that he's not always 100% there. And I've tried to get him to go to the VA and get checked out. So finally, after about 6 months, I finally convinced him, okay, you need to go to the VA, you need to get checked out and see if this is something that that you can get some kind of disability for. Well, when he went at work, he went and talked to our bosses and they said, no, I can't let you off to do that. So it became this big thing. So they sent him to their medical doctors and their doctors where I work were like, no, he's fine. And went back in there. And then they wouldn't give him the time off to even go get this checked out at the VA. And
I believe
that's frustrating.
That's against the law, actually, if I remember right. You cannot refuse someone to go get medical, especially a veteran to go to the VA as an employer. I don't think you can refuse them to go get medical care through the VA as a veteran. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a regulation or law that says no.
I can only take it so far. I convinced him to try to do it. He needed to take it the next step. I advised him as much as I could, but that's frustrating to me, as a veteran, how, when you talk about head injuries or PTSD or anything like that, how it's not something you can just see, so you got this situation
that's one of the big problems is you can't necessarily see. Obviously somebody's knocked out on the playing field. It's pretty obvious. Or they take a big hit and they're wobbling all over the place. When you know, when it's obvious, but it's the ones that aren't obvious, or the ones that, you know, one of the things that really kind of throws things off is you may not even have any difficulty or any symptoms, any problems that show up right away. It could be a week later. And, you know, one of the things I talk about a lot is with kids. You know, when you have somebody that's a straight A student and now all of a sudden they're failing classes, there's a problem. And, you know, one of the things that's got to be looked at is, have they had a head injury? You know, are they involved in sports? Because you don't go from being a straight A student to all of a sudden struggling and failing classes. No matter how much you want to try to cover it up.
No, well, in your book, you know, one of the things, your big thing in your book, When Brains Collide, is talking about omega-3 fatty acids. And this is something, Gary, when my back got injured this last time, Gary was quick to tell me, you know, you need to be taking fish oil and turmeric to start with that inflammation. How can taking that help you whenever you have some type of brain injury? Well,
the brain's made of fat. I mean, you know, bluntly speaking, it's made of fat. But there's many different kinds of fats. And about 30% of those fats are omega-3s, or DHA is the actual one that we find. About 30% of the weight of the brain, 30% of those fats are DHA. So you are what you eat. Your body reflects it, your health reflects it, your brain reflects on what you eat. And so if you're not consuming enough DHA or enough omega-3s, you're going to start, your brain's composition literally will be affected by that, and vice versa. If you start taking doses of fish oil, for example, or eating good quality salmon 2 or 3 times a week, your brain's going to reflect that. And, you know, getting into the biochemistry for just a split second is all the downstream effects of when life is occurring, but even more so when there's any kind of damage to neurons or to the brain. It depends on the composition of what that cell is made of. The cell membrane, literally, you know, what's being released from the cell membrane. And it could be DHA and omega-3s, which are very anti-inflammatory and help with all kinds of things. Or it could be, if you have too many omega-6s, which the downstream biochemical effects are very pro-inflammatory and continue to cause more and more damage. So you are what you eat, and your brain reflects that more than anything.
Yeah, well, isn't it, what are you saying, was it 25-30% of your brain is composed of omega-3 fatty acids?
30%.
Yeah, 30%. Now, I've always seen it in literature as 25%. And I figured when you said 30, that made more sense to me, because I'd always heard they always err on the low side, and that makes more sense. Now
well, the problem is, all right, so here, one of the problems is, again, you are what you eat. So the typical American diet is devoid of omega-3s and so surplus of omega-6s, the pro-inflammatory omega-6s, that we're setting ourselves up for these problems. So are we seeing more concussions? Yeah, because we're looking for them. But I really actually believe, I wish there was a way to show this or prove it, I think we're seeing actually more concussions because of the dietary influence. And I think that we're seeing the concussions that 20, 30, 50 years ago would have gotten better, aren't getting better like they would have because of our diet.
That's interesting. Have you seen anything where there are studies like from somebody that lives out in the Pacific or something like that, island type people that eat a lot of fish and things like that, and years later, whether they have symptoms of Alzheimer's and things like that compared to an American diet? Have you seen anything like that?
Oh, sure. There's there's lots of great work out there, looking at, like, say, Iceland, Greenland, Japan, and the rates of heart disease are lower. The rates of Alzheimer's, dementia, It doesn't mean that they're not there, but the rates are a lot lower than what they are in the U.S.
Plus, they're just longevity. Their lifespan is a lot longer, usually in areas that eat a lot of fish too, isn't it?
Yeah, well, like Okinawa, for example, is one of the longest average lifespans of any population, any culture in the world.
Well, we rank like 50th or 49th. I can't remember what the latest in life expectancy. With all the technology and things Americans have and the United States has, we're well down the list on life expectancy. Well, and it definitely has a lot to do with diet. I mean,
as you know, we've got a great acute healthcare system. You get hit by a truck, you don't need acupuncture. You need a doctor. You need an emergency room or a surgeon. So we've got to, and this reflects in the military. I mean, you think about what we're doing in the military, and you remember most advances in medicine over mankind have really been, a lot of it came out of wars. I mean, conquering malaria was done by the Army. So, yellow fever, we wouldn't have been able to build the Panama Canal. We didn't figure out and conquer yellow fever.
Yeah, that's true.
But on the surgical side, think about the MASH, the show, the movie and the show MASH. The Korean War and the evacuation with the helicopters dramatically changed the trajectory of acute care. And that now, somebody gets injured in Iraq or Afghanistan, they're being treated in Bethesda or at least in Germany within a day or two. I mean, it's crazy to think what it has come to and our amazing ability to do that acute care. We suck in chronic care, though. I mean, absolutely suck. And that's not just the military, and that's not just head injury. That's our entire society. When you talk about diabetes, obesity, all these things are lifestyle influenced, and lifestyle means diet and exercise. And, we suck as a society, and the medical system looks at it and, instead of one problem, one drug, one cure, like you do with an infectious disease like strep throat or something like that, we look at it now, we do the same thing. We apply that same simple logic and say one symptom, one drug, the symptom goes away. Great. All right, you got another symptom, another drug, that goes away. And on and on and on. And you get a 25-year-old soldier that's on a dozen medications, half of them covering up the symptoms that are side effects from previous medications. Exactly.
I think the general rule is if you take one prescription, you will end up taking 3 to counteract the other side effects of the initial prescription drug that you took. So you have to take 2 additional after that. And it's crazy.
Well, I don't know how true that is, but we're very quick to throw drugs at symptoms when we're not really addressing the underlying problem.
Well, exactly. And who knows whether that side effect is a side effect from the drug or a side effect of that person not being healthy to begin with. And it's causing this chain reaction in the body as far as the biochemistry. And I've always said this about natural medicine because people look at natural medicine in some of those worlds as the cure-all. And I go, natural medicine doesn't work if you're unhealthy. I went, you can't use supplements, herbs, and things like that. They will not work if you're unhealthy. Will they have a little bit of an effect? Yeah. But if you're healthy and you take herbal medicines, the reactions are completely different. And again, that's what I mean. I've always said people think because I lean more on the natural side, but I really don't. I split the two. I say I have a modern medicine doctor and I have an ND. I have a naturopathic doctor as well. And I use them together to figure out because I don't want my chiropractor doing my back surgery. Like you said, it's pretty straightforward. I want a neurosurgeon doing my brain surgery, my back surgery. I don't want some other person, doing that. And it is an interesting balance. Now, with that said, you've created this omega-3 protocol for traumatic brain injury. Can you explain to people what that all entails and how you utilize that?
Well, you know, and I don't know what you said in the introduction, but so let me just say, I am as traditionally trained MD medical doctor as there ever was. I mean, you know, so it wasn't taught in medical school. This is all stuff that I had to basically teach myself recently. You know, so I was stationed in Bethesda on the grounds of what's now the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. And you're around wounded warriors. You go to the gym and there's guys missing arms and legs going to work out, you know. So you can't help but, you know, what can I do to you know, with the war effort and address things. And I just sort of put two and two together and came up with some odd number. And so one of those things that I kind of put together was in January 2006, there was a Sago mine coal accident in West Virginia. And there was like 23 miners trapped underground. And by the time 40 hours later that they got to them, there was one guy that was barely alive. And I started hearing stories about how they used high dose omega-3s or fish oil from to help this guy recover brain function, and he essentially walked out of the hospital like a couple months later. And I thought, and literally I went to the head of research at the Defense Veteran Brain Injury Center and said, is anybody looking at omega-3s to help our soldiers recover from traumatic brain injury? And the answer was, no, why don't you? Because I don't know anything about it. And, but so I had to learn. I had to teach myself. And so I kept trying it and kept doing it, and I just started having great successes. So when I talk about the Omega Protocol, it's the idea, and I got two of them. I got one, like if your kid or your loved one's in a coma, you know, after a car accident, that's very different than telling, you know, the walking, talking veteran or somebody, you know, swallow a couple of capsules. So you have to treat them a little bit different. But the idea is the same, is to saturate the brain with what it's made of, what it took to make a brain in the first place. And you cannot make a brain in utero. Your fetus will not grow a brain without omega-3s. And so to the point where it'll leach the omega-3s from the mother during pregnancy. So we all know about calcium. You know, we say, oh, the calcium, you know, mom's got to have enough calcium, you know, or she'll be at risk of osteoporosis and this, that, and the other because the baby's leaching that calcium. Well, the same thing's happening with the mother's brain and giving up the stores of DHA in order for the kid developing to grow a brain in the first place.
That makes sense. Well, and that's why most cultures have a pre-conception diet, not only for the mother, but the father. And then they also have a post-conception diet. And they found this primarily in isolated cultures that haven't been affected by the Western diet per se. And they have found that their diet it ends up being high in vitamin D, cholesterol, omega-3 essential fatty acids, and saturated fat. That's what they find primarily what it's composed of. So that makes sense because
not fat-free yogurt.
No. It's usually comes from animal brains and eggs and organ meats. I mean, it's fairly amazing how, like I said, how advanced we are, but we've lost touch with diet.
Yeah.
The very basic thing that we do.
I'd say we're a victim of our own success. I mean, you think about, the greatest generation, World War II. I mean, in 3.5 years, we vanquished the Axis powers. Now when you think about it, and we're in our 16th year in Afghanistan. In 3.5 years, we defeated Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan, and the Japanese Empire in 3.5 years. And then what did we do? And then we cured polio, or well, almost cured polio. We cured, or we stopped smallpox. We eliminated smallpox, I guess is the best way to put it. We pretty much almost eliminated polio. But I mean, that was huge back in the 50s when the polio vaccine came out. Now all of a sudden we got vaccines and we're stopping diseases. And now all of a sudden we put a man on the moon. There's nothing that we couldn't do, right? And so how do we feed our, how do we feed our people calorically dense, easy to grow things with Roundup and all that stuff?
Yeah.
And it's soy and corn. Instead of diversified foods, we started corporate farming, subsidizing farmers, growing soybean and corn, and the amount of soybean oil that was consumed in the United States just skyrocketed, like 12,000% over 1 or 2 decades, starting around 1970. The biggest source of omega-6s in the American diet.
Well, and high inflammatory diet too. When you're getting most of your primary calories from refined grains and sugar, you got a problem. Sugar is, highly oxidative. It's actually poisonous to the human body, except in lower doses. And that's the thing. Once you start, and that's how I look at it, is we just consume far too many empty calories, right. Far too many, and far too many calories in general, since, over years, as I've shifted my diet, that I eat far fewer calories than I did and eat less, but yet I'm far healthier, and I weigh pretty much not, obviously losing the extra fat, but like 5 pounds. That's the difference. It's a very slight difference, but it's amazing. I tell people a calorie is not a calorie. Now, in your studies, how would you say that this high inflammatory diet affects, far as causing more brain trauma or not being able to recover from it as quickly? Have you seen any of the data kind of show that our diet also is causing more concussions, more or deeper tissue injuries, brain bruising, and then it inhibits the recovery as well? Have you seen that in any of the studies or literature?
Yeah, actually, I mean, it's studies, yes. It's unpublished studies, and which is frustrating to me because it was basically something that I designed, and around the time I was getting ready to retire from the military, and it's a project that just continues to sort of linger on 5 years later. But one of the things that we definitely noticed, we're basically bluntly beating rats over the head of exposing them to blasts and stuff like that, was that if we had them on the American diet, they did, number one, they got fat really quick, the rats did, compared to sort of the standard rat chow that they would normally eat. So we found that they got obese very quickly, and that the brain trauma was significantly worse on the American diet and responded better to omega-3s when we gave it to them, IV afterwards. So, yeah, but none of that's been published.
None of it's been published. Oh, that is amazing. Well, no, not really.
You're busy. I mean, the guy that took over the project from me, he's a clinician. He's not an omega-3 expert.
Okay.
The animal guys, I mean, they publish a little bit, but they get paid to do animal studies. They don't get paid for drug development. They get paid for animal studies. So as long as somebody keeps paying them, they're going to keep doing the work.
Well, and it's very, as you know, you're obviously a doctor, and publish or perish, but a lot of the studies today are very, very difficult to sift through, because a lot of them are paid for by the industry, such as a drug company. Coca-Cola's been famous for backing a ton of studies, and it gets tricky, and you want the good science to get out there so everyone can know. But it's sad that things like that do not get published, because it's very important to understand that. I think as your book deals with children as well, and head injuries and concussions, and understanding that parents, if they saw a study like that, would be like, oh, okay, one way for me to help eliminate my kid getting a concussion or traumatic brain injury playing sports might be to feed them correctly instead of giving them Kool-Aid and 3 juice boxes and, fruit wraps and Pop-Tarts all day. That maybe, if I think about this, I can help them out. But that's what a study like that would help, because it shows the causal chain and shows the significant difference of a healthy diet as opposed to the standard American diet and brain health. Pretty straightforward, but yeah.
Well, there's I've heard about and I don't remember his name, but there's a surgeon down in Atlanta, and he's been really big on vitamin D, but also has added omega-3s and so on. And I've heard rumors, I don't know if this has been published or anything, but like his kid's high school, he got the high school football team to all take a certain amount of vitamin D every day, and they dropped their concussions from whatever to 0. They've not had a concussion in football since they got the team taking vitamin D on a regular basis. Is it published? Probably not. Is it out somewhere in some article or popular press? Yeah, I mean, that's how I heard about it. But is it in the New England Journal of Medicine? No. Because
how was he doing it? He was just having them drink milk, or were they taking a supplement?
I don't know. I think they're doing a supplement. But it's the first. One of the big criticisms of the work that I do, there's no double-blinded, placebo-controlled clinical trial that shows it work. And it's dangerous. I'm like, it's food. It's and by the way, you're telling the parents to pull the plug on the kid because he's in a coma, and you're saying there's no hope that he's going to recover, but you're saying fish oil is dangerous. What else what are you offering this family? What kind of, the other thing you're offering is to pull the plug, and I could show you, dozens and dozens of cases where in that situation with high doses of fish oil down the feeding tube, the kid had a meaningful recovery. And Sanjay Gupta on CNN has done a couple of shows about it.
Well, the problem is omega-3s are dangerous, very dangerous to the drug companies.
Yes.
That's who they're dangerous to. I mean,
yeah, but it's the doctors that are saying it's dangerous. It might cause them to bleed. Or it might cause them harm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not going to feed somebody? I mean, because what we're really talking about is nutrition.
Yeah.
If you could grind up salmon, good Pacific Northwest salmon, if you could grind it up and push it down a feeding tube, even better. But, and in Germany, they do that. And one of the cases I talk about in the book is a sergeant from the 82nd Airborne that got blown up. And they didn't think he was going to make it. He was so tenuous that they didn't want to aerovac him from Germany back to Bethesda. And so they literally sent him out to a German hospital. Well, his fiance, now wife, I remember, was telling me she was just amazed because they would come in, they would talk to him like he was wide awake, even though he was in a coma. They would talk to him. They were grinding up whole foods and shoving it down his feeding tube. And he had a pretty meaningful recovery.
Well, anyone who's eaten hospital food knows. I mean, I've been in the hospital a couple times for surgeries, and I had to eat the hospital food. It is the most god-awful crap that you could ever imagine. I mean, no wonder people struggle to recover. The food is terrible, and I remember they tried tricking me because they knew I was a health guy. And so the RD comes in, she goes, well, Gary, our food is all organic. It comes from, all of our meat comes from free range animal. She was completely bullshitting me. I mean, she was trying to use this psychosomatic kind of get me in tune of, oh, this stuff's good. They bring it in and the tray looks like someone puked on the tray. And it was awful. I couldn't even get some of it down. It made me so sick. And don't get me wrong, I was post-surgery, so I was nauseous anyway. but still I shouldn't be having this reaction. I mean, it was bad.
Do you guys remember, you know, when I came in the Army, there was rations. It was not even MREs. I mean, it was like MREs were like a new thing, you know, a couple of years in. And then the next step was, do you remember T rations at all? Does that sound familiar?
I don't remember the gap between C rations and T rations. And no, I don't remember those.
T rations were, like trays. That's why they call them T rations. It was trays of, you know, enough to feed like a dozen people they were already cooked or whatever, and you heated them up. And the very first time out on a deployment, it was like breakfast or something. And, you know, you get in the mess hall line and, you know, out in the field. I mean, and the first guy, you know, gives a flop of some stuff in my tray. The next guy flop some other stuff. The third guy flop some other stuff. The fourth guy says, "Do you want syrup on that?" And I'm like,
what?
Which one would you put syrup on?
Yeah, which blob?
I had no idea. I mean, we used to just, dinner, it was mystery meat. You never knew. You had no idea what you were eating.
Well, I was lucky. I lived on Air Force Base, so we had steak and lobster, and
they got real food.
Yeah.
We used to remember, Chambers. We used to go to that Air Force Base in Florida, down the road from us, and we ate a couple times, and they finally said, "You guys can't eat here anymore," because we'd figured out hey, their yogurt comes in containers, guys. It's You'll Play. It's not in a big plastic bowl at the end of the line that's been out all day. But I, being in law enforcement too, and working in the education system as well, people are pretty surprised that food all comes from the same place. Basically, prison food, the school food, and military food are all manufactured primarily by the same company. And I'm pretty sure it's owned by some congressman's half dimwit son or something, who's a billionaire today.
No, but I can tell you if it's the same, it might be the same company, but one of the companies, the CEO of the company is one of my neighbors.
Oh, no. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this show.
Like our kids go to the same high school together and been good friends for years. So I haven't had that discussion yet.
I would probably.
Now. If he listens to this, you might now.
I would highly avoid that topic if at all possible.
Probably, I'm sure that would be a good way to end what little friendship there is.
Yeah. Go, by the way, your food sucks and you're poisoning all the kids. The prisoners, I don't care about. Some of them. But, with that, I know you've kind of delved into the CBD oil as well now and using some of that. What have you found? Because that's more controversial, obviously. And I don't want to put you.
I like I like the tried and true things. I'm advocating high doses of fish oil, and I think hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
There's no doubt about it. Oh, no doubt about it.
And so if that's not enough, being the heretic that I am, now I've gotten into CBD. Just one controversial thing after another. I don't know. They either find me or I find them. I'm not sure which is what's going on there.
Well, and there's so many misconceptions around it, because you can get CBD from marijuana, and you can get it from hemp. And primarily what we're talking about is the supplement derived from hemp that is sold as a supplement, because you can't sell, it's legal in 43 states, maybe. It's real tricky. You got bureaucrats involved in it. Who knows anymore? It changes day to day.
They don't know the difference between when it's cannabis derived, that's true. But is it from hemp or is it from marijuana? So as you said, you can go to Trader Joe's and buy hemp seeds, and so they're not illegal, they're food. So all we're doing, in that industry is deriving the CBD, isolating the CBD, not even completely by itself. It's not like it's 100% CBD, but you're isolating or concentrating the CBD from hemp, and we're selling hemp seed. You can buy hemp seeds at the grocery store. So it is a food, but our legislators and most 99% of the population doesn't understand that, and they hear cannabis and they immediately think it's illegal. So it is a bit of a gray area. And then you got the DEA that says stupid things. The FDA's got other things. But you know what? Health and Human Services, the NIH, holds a patent for CBD as a neuroprotectant and antioxidant. So who's right? You got one part of the government saying it's an amazing antioxidant neuroprotectant with high value use in degenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, AIDS, dementia, stroke, and traumatic brain injury. Pretty phenomenal. And, by the way, one of the inventors listed as the author on that is a Nobel laureate who is the guy that discovered neurotransmitters in the brain.
Wow.
And that's one part of the government. You got another part of the government that's saying it's all illegal. Schedule 1 drug has no medicinal value, highly addictive, all the bullshit that they throw out that is just absolutely absurd.
Isn't it insanity? And yet we were running into the biggest opiate epidemic we've ever had in this country. And yet pot is the bad.
You're right. You want to start decreasing the heroin overdoses, start legalizing marijuana. And I'm not a marijuana consumer. I've never been high in my life. I am not I will tolerate marijuana use. But where my real interest is the medicinal part of the cannabis plant. Well, actually, the whole thing is medicinal. THC is what gets you high, and it has some medicinal value. I mean, it does. But the real medicinal value by far is the CBD part of the cannabis plant.
Well, combining the two, when you combine THC and CBD, it's a synergistic effect. I have found that when you combine those two, and I did see a recent study somewhere on that when you combine the two of them, when it comes to pain management, it works much, much better when you combine the two. But it's got to be sensical, It can't be a super high strain THC. It's got to be basically 1-to-1 usually, THC to CBD oil or CBD, and it works. I mean, I live in Washington State, for God's sakes. It's no secret that you can buy pot here anywhere you want to go. You can buy CBD oil anywhere. It doesn't matter. And it's interesting that I also say most pot smokers aren't knocking off liquor stores. I'll continue to say this. I was in law enforcement. I had to deal with drugs. You named a couple agencies I worked with, and the complete idiocracy that went on there was unbelievable. But we're putting kids in prison. We're ruining their lives for smoking or having pot. To me, that is absolute insanity, and it's an injustice to people because we lock up people at such a higher rate than any other developed country in the world. And primarily today, a lot of it's pot. And that to me just, even when I was in law enforcement, I was like, this makes absolutely no sense. And of all the drugs we have, that marijuana and CBD, we know, have been around forever. They've been used forever for thousands and thousands of years, but yet we're attacking them. But the opioid epidemic is primarily caused by us allowing the drug companies to turn us into addicts. Sorry, I had to go on a rant. I worked in it. It pisses me off. It's unbelievable to me that we can literally kill people and turn them into addicts all for just a little more money. Just give me the money,
Well, and I think, maybe Colorado and states like Washington, certainly Colorado is kind of leading the charge in many ways. If you not control it, if you legalize it, have the distribution systems, and bring it into the financial, out of the financial dark into, our actual financial and tax systems, it's going to be a win for everybody.
Yeah, and regulate it. I mean, don't get me wrong. And see, everyone thinks we had this talk with Josh. People think I'm an oddball because they think I'm some disgruntled ex-government guy. I'm not. I say there is a reason for the FDA. There's a reason for the CDC. There's a reason for HHS. They play a valuable role. Unfortunately, those roles get skewed when you put in politics, and that's been in any developed country or group. When bureaucracies grow so big, they take over. But the pot thing to me is just I think most people just go, this is beyond belief. I mean, I just don't even understand. I think the problem with Colorado, though, they've ran into some problems because they get a little too loosey-goosey at times. And they let it roll. Out here, what they found is they had more accidents, car accidents, and things like that due to people driving high. And they didn't quite foresee that one. And I kind of went, really? You legalize it, duh. Yeah, you're going to have that issue. It's just like alcohol. We did prohibition, then we legalized it again. And yeah, you're going to have car accidents because people are under the influence of alcohol. That's kind of a no-brainer. But now they kind of target that and they go, well, see what happened? We made pot legal and now everyone's getting killed in car accidents because they're high. And that's totally untrue. Statistically, it went up because, yeah, now it is legal. Is it still illegal to drive under the influence of it? Yeah. So it's just, yeah, we go in rhetorical circles on that one.
Yeah, one day when you're king, you can change it all.
Ain't going to happen. I just hang out in my travel trailer and go up to my 20 acres and hang out. I did my time. I like we talked about prior, I'm a grassroots guy. I tell people, because I've been approached, they go, why don't you run for a political position? Why don't you get out? You need to be beating the drum. I go, guys, you have no idea what you're talking about. You don't attack the snake by going after the most poisonous one and trying to attack its head. It's more of, I tell people, you got to start it in your communities, start educating your communities, bring it from that level. If you go straight to the head of the government, you go, you know what? I'm going to poke you in the eye. They're going to turn around and bust you right in the nose. I mean, there's ways to do it. Now, that's why Josh spoke so highly of you and we've spoken to you and why we like you so much. You got to be reasonable in it. And I know in the system.
Yeah. And I know, like, especially CBD, Gary and I just started taking it, 2 months ago? Really, we started taking it more on a regular basis. And my quality of life, I think my overall.
What have you noticed? Huh? Like, what do you mean? What have you noticed?
I was going through, I'm not gonna say I was going through a rough period. I work in a job that don't love and all this stuff. And I was not necessarily depressed, but I was having depressive moods. And I kind of looked at some different things. And I actually went and talked to a psychologist and tried Wellbutrin. When I got out of the military, I had a head injury in SEAL training. Got out of the military about a year later, and for 2 years, man, I was in bad shape mentally. And I think it was because of the head injury, and then the VA sent me to a doctor, and I tried, and they put me on Lexapro and all this stuff. And it never worked for me. I mean, I'd always gotten in a worse mood. It sent me down a bad road. And this Wellbutrin that I took, within 2 weeks, I could tell I was just getting mad, and it was making it worse. So Josh came along and met him, and he gave me some samples of their plus CBD and the gold, and I started taking it. And within a couple of weeks, I was like, man, I feel good. I feel great, actually. The periods of depression went away, and I just had a better outlook on life. So I became immediately, I was like, it's got to be this, so.
Well, and, so my experience as a clinician has been, a lot of, if not every head injury patient has problems with anxiety, whether it was before or because of the head injury. Depression's a huge issue as well. But I mean, CBD you say it works for in a couple of weeks. You notice a difference with, just sort of your general mood. Let me tell you, in minutes, if you're having a panic attack or anxiety attack or just feeling really anxious, 15, 20 minutes, CBD will drop that or even eliminate it. I've seen it time. Yeah.
I can tell you the first time I took it, I went to the Kentucky Industrial Hemp Association conference, and Josh gave me a little dab of the gold that I put under my tongue. And I went and sat back down, and I was talking to one of the women that were sitting at the table with me. And, I've used pot in the past, and I know exactly what it feels like to be high. So I know that experience. So I was sitting there talking to her, and I just kind of stopped, and I told her, I was like, man, I feel really good. I was like, I don't know what it is. I said, my brain just feels like it just turned on. And I said, it almost feels like I'm high, but I have no effects of that. I just feel a nice euphoric feeling. I got up and went to the bathroom and felt like I had a better stride when I walked to the bathroom. It just made me feel really good without any negative effects of being high. And I was like, man, this stuff, I've never had anything like that. I mean, I've taken a lot of stuff to try to feel better, but I've never had something that quick just completely changed my mood in only a positive way.
Yeah.
Plus my back started feeling better after a couple of weeks. That was a great thing too.
Yeah. So, I mean, just sort of summarize that, CBD, hemp-derived CBD in particular, is great for chronic pain, mood, helps with depression, helps with anxiety. What else is it? I mean, and there's lots of good scientific explanation why that we're not really getting into, and it's not, we don't need to go down that road. But it really does help with all those different things, and without the side effects of Wellbutrin or Paxil or whatever.
Well, also, I can take a lot of it and I might get sick, but I'm not going to die. I mean, that's, you could, I mean, what is it? It's like for marijuana, the LD50 is like 1,500 pounds or something crazy like that.
It is because, here's the quick scientific explanation for it is that when you're talking about alcohol or opioids, there's receptors in the brainstem that control your breathing and your heart rate. And, you overstimulate those, you stop breathing. If you're if you overdose on morphine, you stop breathing. Or cocaine, your heart, can basically get out of control. There are no receptors, or virtually no receptor. I don't want to say no, but there are basically no receptors in the brainstem that control breathing and cardiovascular. No receptors for CBD or THC even. So cannabis plant, no matter what you take, whether it's high CBD, high THC, can't overwhelm that part of the brainstem that causes you to stop breathing. So you're not going to overdose. I mean, you can overdose, but that's a whole different thing.
But it's a different kind of overdose.
It's not going to kill you. It's not going to kill you overdose. You're not going to stop breathing. You're not going to, you're not going to go into atrial fibrillation or VFib or whatever and die. It's not going to happen from the cannabis plant.
Well, what is it in Colorado now? The hospitals, when people come in that have overdosed on marijuana, they have a special room that they go to with like cartoons and different colorful painted walls just to go sit in, let them chill out and, maybe talk them down for whatever panic attack they're having.
One time I took a little bit too much of the plus CBD gold, kind of a funny story. I basically was scooping some out and putting it into a smaller container for a patient, and had the knife, and I just let me, lick the knife like a butter, like a butter or peanut butter or something. Not thinking, I was like, oh, it won't hurt me, And about, a half hour later or so, I was like completely spaced out. I had no idea what was going on. And, teaching point, as I learned, you can overdo CBD. And on the anxiety issue, it's this bell-shaped curve. And so it helps, but then, the more you take, but you can overdo it, and you actually can put yourself into a state of anxiety, instead of just relieving it. So if you take too much, you put yourself into that state of anxiety. So you can't overwhelm the receptors, but it doesn't cause you to stop breathing and drop over.
Well, you could do that with coffee and sugar too. I mean, you can drink too much coffee and go into a little anxiety attack, or, kind of lose it. So, it's all, for me, I started probably about a year ago, Dwayne, I started playing with CBD. Mm-hmm. But mine, I was taking it from marijuana derived, and now I've been playing with the hemp derived, because here I was trying to figure it out. What I've noticed is I'm a lot calmer, a lot easier. My Irish will get a hold of me, and I just tell him, like my friend said, he burns hot. So it's one of those, you cross the line, you can't turn me off. It's once I'm pissed and I see red, forget it. It's over. You got to let me unwind, chill out. What I've noticed with this is I'm a much more even keel, and I'm having a lot better time with my pain management, because I've been dealing with chronic pain for 20 years now. And through multiple drugs and anti-anxiety, everything. I've been probably put on just about anything and everything at one point. And what I noticed is that once I kind of veered into this world and started messing with CBD oil more and more, and also I started combining it with THC, that's where I've noticed that, wow, okay, this is kind of the sweet spot. And I don't have the typical chronic aches that I have. I still have pain, but it's much more manageable. Have you found that in your clinical studies? Have you found exactly that? Because I was just curious. This is an experiment of one right now.
And a few patients. I don't see a lot of patients, so I don't get that much clinical experience. And and I still see some government people, and so it's it's like, it's not worth, if you don't want to come up on a positive on a urinalysis, not worth your top secret clearance taking it, so we got to kind of work around other things. But
oh no, I'm just talking about the CBD, not the
the CBD, there can be trace amounts of THC, and
that's true. That's true. That's true.
I wouldn't take that chance. I had a top secret clearance for about 30 years. I would never have taken that chance.
I never did this until I was out.
When I had my top secret.
No. Yeah, I made sure I was long gone before I did start playing around.
There's some other patients that I've seen post-surgical, not that I've dealt with them directly, but I know of people that have used it post-surgically to help with the pain management, and basically needed almost no opioids or whatever after like knee surgery or knee replacement. One guy who's actually a neurosurgeon had a knee replacement, and he managed his pain solely with CBD.
That's incredible. Fantastic.
That's incredible. And, I'm kind of in that same situation as far as, where I work, they do extensive drug testing there. So I have to ask myself the question, is it worth my happiness and my well-being, knowing that this works now, to possibly get busted at work on a drug test? So it's to me, it's frustrating, but it's because, okay, this stuff works, but yet, it could cost me my job. And right. I think that's the craziest thing.
So if you're doing hemp-derived CBD, your probability is slim, but is it worth the risk? That's that's an individual thing. You got to ask yourself.
Well, and you piss a positive, you're in deep trouble. I mean, especially in the government, as we all know. It's just, I remember I'd read every supplement label. I made sure everything I took, I'm all, okay, I do not want any of this to negatively impact me on a drug test, no matter what. So it's a tricky road. And that's the sad part, is we know it works and there's a lot of benefits to it. But if I was still in the government,
gray area,
I would not touch it. I wouldn't do it. I flat out wouldn't do it. And that's sad, because to me, it's had a profound effect on how I'm dealing with my pain management. I mean, I wouldn't have said, I don't know. It would have been interesting after my spinal fusion if I could have tried something like this. I'd never taken hydrocodone before, ever. I'd never been anywhere close to it. Well, you have back surgery and have your spine fused, you're going to be taking it. There's just no getting around it in a way.
You know, everybody's pain management's completely different. For example, Tylenol does absolutely nothing for me.
Nothing.
And you know, having a tooth pulled, you know, wisdom teeth, or even having surgery, and Tylenol with codeine doesn't help me at all. Does nothing for my pain. Percocet works, but you know what? Actually, it's Tylenol with codeine. I'd rather take Motrin. And actually, you know, post-surgically, they're giving me Tylenol with codeine. I'm like, no thanks. Give me 800 milligrams of Motrin, and totally fine. So everybody's different. I mean, Tylenol with codeine is a big seller because it works in most people. It doesn't do anything for me. So everybody's different.
Well, and my thing for me was that I wish I would have had the opportunity to at least try something different, because I only took it. I just gritted my teeth and sucked it up. After 2 weeks, I got off it. I could already see problems with it, taking those potent of painkillers, because I was also taking Valium, hydrocodone, and what was the other one? I had the pump where they were pumping it directly into my back. Oh God, I can't. It was a wicked cocktail. And after those 14 days, I was a flat out drug addict. I mean, I could tell if I would have kept pushing it and going on, that I had to make a choice. I had to say, I either got to suck it up and deal with this pain and be miserable, or I see this going down a bad, bad road. Because it got to a point in 14 days, I was looking forward to the pill already. I was looking at the clock for my every 4 hours. I just stare at it going, come on, let's hurry up. And once I realized that was happening and I weaned myself off, it took about 3-4 days for me to kind of wean myself off of just taking it for 14 days. That, to me, it scared me to death. I went, if I didn't have to take this, I wouldn't have taken it. I mean, if there was some other alternative, I'm like, I couldn't understand as an agent how people in the Dr. Feelgoods and how people got hooked. Once I took it and I was on it and I was taking a cocktail, I fully got it. It all sunk in, because I quickly became physically and mentally addicted like that. It happened really quickly. That frightens me. I mean, no wonder. And once you're on it, I've known people, once you're on those painkillers, it's not easy to get off.
No. Yeah. And I mean, I'm the same way. I was put on some oxycodone, and, you know, I can tell you right now, I haven't taken it for a while, but man, I like that stuff, you know? So it's, you know, and it was because it was the addiction. I took it for just a few days and couldn't get off of it. I mean, it wasn't 2 weeks. It was just a few days. And I was like, man, I was like, what am I going to do when this runs out? So I know that it's addictive, but like I said, I get a better feeling, I think, with the CBD, and I can not take it, and I don't ever crave it, you know? So it's so different and so much better. I mean, I don't know. It's just how much better I feel taking it than when I don't.
Oh, and you can function.
Yeah.
You can continue to function. The only thing I could do literally was stare at the TV. I could not read. I couldn't do anything productive. Well, I couldn't get around very well, but still, I tried reading. I couldn't do it. And then when I got off, I remember, you know, it's the typical symptoms, the typical withdrawal symptoms. I had a severe headache. I was cranky. I had the shakes. I had the chills. I was nauseous. It was the whole gamut. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And it was strong. I thought not just mild withdrawals. It was a severe, like 36-hour withdrawal I went, these guys are trying to kill me. You know, I was like, you know, the surgery, I made it through the surgery. Now they're trying to kill me with the drugs. And they were pretty shocked that I didn't even finish it. And they asked me, I said, I cannot do this. Because when I started drooling, that's when I realized this is not a good path. Literally, I'd take it, and it took about 10 minutes when I'd take the whole cocktail, and I would kind of stoop and start drooling on myself. And then I'd fall asleep. And well, that's a heroin addict. I mean, that is truly a heroin addict. That's what I was doing. And it didn't help the pain. That was the problem I had with it. It didn't help the pain. It just zoned and conked me out to where I couldn't focus on it. That's all it did. And CBD actually helps the pain. And I don't conk out. Huh. Yeah, kind of amazing. And that's why I was curious, as I know you have to obviously be very careful. But do you take CBD oil regularly then, here and there? Or are you just, I mean, how does that work? I mean, do you use it?
I've started taking it regularly. I find if I take it every morning, just because I think it's a good habit to have. And I've found with a couple with patients, I start them off. Take it in the morning, so your day starts off, on a good even keel. And if you need to, if you have an anxiety issue later in the day, don't think that I can't take one because I had one in the morning. Go ahead and take another one later on. But for the most part, the feedback I'm getting is if you take it every morning, those anxiety issues don't come up during the day anymore.
That's fantastic. Well, and I'm experimenting with it more on the workout level right now. And I found it to be so far pretty good. I'm taking it pre-workout and post-workout and mixing it with caffeine. So I'm mixing it with an organic espresso. So I have my espresso as I'm going to the gym. I have my CBD oil. And I'm finding the combination to be pretty wicked. I mean, I go in there, I feel great. I have good energy levels, and I'm noticing my recovery time so far. I like it. I don't want to. I always worry about the psychosomatic side of it. Is it my brain telling me, well, you should feel better because you're taking this, So I want to give it longer, but so far, my recovery, I'm noticing a far better recovery time. I'm not nearly as sore. Not nearly, like I said, I'm getting older, the achy joints and stuff. I'm using the salve on my knees, and I find that helps. So, hey, I'm a believer, And I would recommend, because you can't, how much gets into your bloodstream through the salves? Do you know?
Some, not obviously not as much as if you ingest it, and here's one of the issues is the most effective way to take any drug is inhaling it. And I'm not going to advocate for inhaling burning, things, which brings up a whole different area. I think potentially somebody that's really having chronic, acute pain, like post-surgical type of thing, I think the vaping of CBD actually has a lot of potential. And,
I agree.
You're not burning things like tobacco leaves or marijuana, because then you got the carcinogens of the smoke and everything else, in addition to what it's actually doing medicinally. And so I think the vaping, has got a huge potential.
Don't you? Yeah. Is that how you're taking it, Gary? Don't you have a vape for your CBD?
Yeah,
I haven't tried that yet.
It's different because the oral, far as in the drops and stuff, it's a different effect. But when I'm vaping, I'm using the 1-to-1 THC to CBD because I use it for pain management, help me sleep. I use it for different things. I never do that during the day. So I don't know. So I take the CBD straight from the hemp drive during the day. Because obviously I'm not going to go out and operate a motor vehicle or, use a power tool or anything. I'm not stupid. It's one of those, I use it at night. I'm making sure that I'm not going anywhere and that I'm done for the night. And for a guy like me, I mean, I've had some pretty severe injuries and I've gone through some pretty deep, ugly roads of depression and dealing with it. I have found nothing better at this point in my life. I feel that it is something that should be explored.
Well, the Plus CBD oil line of products is now they've just come out with their highest concentration for vaping of hemp-derived CBD. So you might want to give that a try.
I am. That's the next step. I'm going to go to that. I want to test because you know it is. You react differently because you're taking it in a different chemical pattern. You're different. You're getting to the receptors differently. The strength, it depends. Is it getting broken down the stomach? Is it getting broken down the lung? You know, there's so many different ways that
and what's the hardest thing that using it clinically? So from the clinician side, but also from the patient side and telling patients or just anybody. It is personalized medicine, if you want to call it medicine, but it's personalized nutrition. And everybody's dose can be different. And so the three of us might, we could take the same dose and react three different ways. It might be too much for one of us, might be perfect for the other one and not do anything for the third one. It's really individualized, which makes it frustrating because it's not one size fits all. That's why I say I try to get patients to take one of the gel caps in the morning and hopefully that'll just sort of get the day moving in a good direction and hopefully stay there. And it seems to be a pretty set way, almost a one size fits all, but everybody reacts different. And that's one of the frustrating, interesting, depending is to get people to understand is everybody's dose is an individual thing.
Well, my doses and my reactions change differently as to what I'm eating, what stress levels I'm under. I can have totally different effects from taking the same dose, the same time of day, and there's all these other physiological factors going on and emotional and psychological. There's so many different. So I know, it's weird.
Well, scientifically, it's absolutely right. And scientifically, the greatest number of receptors in our body is now believed to be endocannabinoid receptors, or CB1, CB2 receptors, cannabinoid receptors for our own endogenous or endocannabinoids. So we make our own THC and CBD like substances. Our bodies, our brains actually make them themselves. Think of a runner's high, for example. We've always called them like endorphins, right?
Yep.
We say, well, you're high on endorphins because you're really revved up. Yeah, I mean, that's your cannabinoid system. And, nature gives us the way to interact with it, not a perfect match, but a way with THC and CBD to interact with the cannabinoid system. But what you just described, that you can take it and have different reactions, is because it's not like taking an antibiotic and you're curing a disease. What you're doing is you're interacting with your endocannabinoid system. And there's something we call endocannabinoid tone. And so that fluctuates. And, minute by minute, day by day, hour by hour, your endocannabinoid tone fluctuates, and it's influenced by diet and exercise. And so if you overstimulate your endocannabinoid system, you're going to have issues in one direction. If you're understimulating it, you're going to have problems in another way, and some of them acutely, some of them chronically. And so that's kind of that trick, is finding that level right in the middle where your endocannabinoid tone is where it should be, and you feel great and everything's working. You're pain-free, anxiety-free, depression-free, you're thinking clear. That's when your endocannabinoid tone is where it should be, but it can vary throughout different times of the day. And
what's that saying I've heard? If it came down to it, every human being is a drug trafficker. or carrier
Yeah.
mule, because we carry most of the chemicals of Schedule I drugs already in our body. Like DMT is a very, very famous one. DMT is all in the human body. It's in animal body. It's in plants. It's everywhere. But DMT is illegal, but we're already carrying it. And it's amazing how we do these kind of things. We make something illegal, and yet we already produce that chemical. It's just we're using, it's a great way you said it, a supplement. It's not necessarily a medicine. It's a supplement. You're supplementing and adding to get those receptors to have that reaction, to have those receptors take on that chemical in order to make a physiological chemical change, a biochemistry change, in order to get another reaction.
Well, and it's interesting when we talk about brain injury and neuroprotection, CBD actually has been shown to grow the size of the hippocampus deep inside the brain, which helps control a lot. I mean, it's kind of the center structure, the command center of the brain.
Motor skills.
So they've been able to demonstrate that you actually grow new neurons in the hippocampus with stimulating the endocannabinoid system with CBD.
Well, and that's the only part of the brain that can actually regenerate neurons correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Because they just found that out not too long ago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's.
I don't know either.
We don't know what we don't know. But
yeah. Well, what was it? 10 years ago, we had 10 billion neurons. Now we're into trillions of neurons. We think we don't even know, and it's watching humans evolve and what we're learning to me is fascinating because we know so little, but we're making huge strides at the same time. I mean, we've mapped the genome, for God's sakes, and now we can map it fairly quickly. It's pretty amazing where we're going. And I think over time we're going to figure things out, but it always goes back to that tried old true. What we've been using for thousands of years always seems to work best in a way. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for advances in medicine, in drugs. I'm all for that. I'm a big advocate. Hey, I don't want to hold the human race back or health back by thinking that way. But it's pretty amazing that we always end up going back to our prehistoric kind of ancient civilizations and what they used. I mean, Chinese medicine's been around for friggin' over 5,000 years, and we still use it today, and it still works. So it's kind of amazing how now we're back to CBD and the cannabis plant.
That does have a long history in the medicinal world.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on, Dr. Lewis. I'm sure it's getting late for you guys. Heck, I'm on the West Coast, and it's getting
now.
But can you let everyone know where they can get a hold of your book, When Brains Collide?
So when brainscollide.com will direct you. I need a little bit of information about the book, but basically if you click through that, it'll get you to Amazon. So ultimately it's sold through Amazon. When Brains Collide by Michael Lewis. Unfortunately, I'm not the guy that wrote Moneyball and Blindside, but maybe if enough people make that mistake and buy the book because they think it's him, we'll be doing much better.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
But,
yeah, they're going to learn something anyway, right?
Yeah, they'd learn something anyway. So anyway, whenbrainscollide.com or do a quick search on Amazon, When Brains Collide, and it'll be the first one that comes up.
All right, great. Well, I appreciate your time. I think this was a fascinating conversation. I think, every time we do these on a Sunday night, it takes a few minutes to kind of get the podcast rolling. But I think once we got going, this was a really good one. So I appreciate your time, and I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. And I guess we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.